Charlie, what are we looking at here?
This is actually the piece of the 318 Mission Impossible that started it all. David Vizard took this 675 casting, right? He milled it. That's why it has tape on it, because I couldn't. He milled it and then he drilled holes to check the thickness, if it was even possible to mill a head that much and make a quench chamber out of it instead of the open chamber. Andy and I discussed it, and we don't think it's worth it because it's going to make too many other issues.
Yeah, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
I agree. Besides, if you really want to stick with the intent, it's got to be an open chamber.
Right.
That's just how I feel about it. So what happened is David cut this in half. He milled it. He drilled holes through it, checked the thickness in a couple spots. He poured the intake, the exhaust, and did a ton of chamber work. And then he sent it to me. And I did my analysis on it. And then I took the chunk and I cut away a bunch of it so I could really get an idea of how thick the casting was. Yes, I have my sonic, but some compound curves,
you can't get
the sonic will not do it.
Yeah.
Like the roof of this exhaust port. It's just, you guys probably aren't going to be able to see it, but the curves inside here are just too tight. So if you notice, I had to drill holes through the casting and actually measure how thick the casting was, and then I can go by that and make it a more efficient design on the real ones and still have a safety factor involved.
Let me ask you this. After doing this and your work with the heads that you did, how much core shift did you encounter?
Horrible. That's one of the reasons I have different flows on different ports. Some flow better on the low lifts, some flow better on the high lifts. Some have a little bit less swirl in the low lifts, some have a little more. Because literally this port is, some of them they're pushed towards the center of the cylinder, some of them are a little bit more to the cylinder wall. That's going to change the way the air flows out of it, and if it's shifted over to the cylinder wall, you're going to get more swirl. Not necessarily better flow, but that is where the swirl comes from.
Right. So, folks, what you're looking at here is really a piece of history, in my opinion, because this is really where it all started. We chopped this head up on the saw. David did his rough end port job, then sent it to Charlie, and I couldn't tell you probably how many hours you just have tied up in this chunk of metal.
I brought a stack of cards from my punch machine.
Yeah.
How many hours? I'm afraid to calculate it up. Ridiculous.
So now that we're done looking at the moon rock, show me the beauty of your handiwork.
Okay.
Moon rock.
That's what it looks like. It looks like something from an alien planet.
That's its name now. It's the moon rock.
Now let me talk about this.
Go right ahead.
So, whenever I get an opportunity to look at a porter's head, unless you've done this type of work, you really don't have any idea the amount of time and effort it takes to do what's been done right here, okay? Not only the work it's been done with the grinder, but this is cast iron. If this was aluminum, this would have been done like that. But being old cast iron like this, I have a true appreciation for the amount of work that's been put into this head. I mean, when you look in here in the bowls and all of the things that he has done, and especially if you've kept up with his work on his channel, and I know that you're regular viewers, I mean, you've seen what he's done. But to actually see it in person, I definitely have a much greater appreciation after looking at it and witnessing it firsthand.
Thank you, Andy. That was very nice. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it's a really interesting project, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to work with Andy. I wanted to work with David, and I'm very happy I have. I think I touched this.
You definitely did.
Yeah, I think I touched the keyboard. Sorry. You still rolling?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is actually a 675 casting cylinder head, which is exactly the casting that is down there. And like I said in my video, the reason why we didn't use the heads that were brought to us is they were not usable. The only thing they were good for was research, figuring out what we could do to the heads, what couldn't be done to the heads, and then where did these heads actually come from, Charlie?
Oh, my friend Tim had a 318 in Facebook Marketplace. So I call him up and I tell him who I am and I tell him about the project. He's like, Charlie, I'm a subscriber. Come and get him. So we go. Rob and I went there. We pulled the heads off, but they were a set of J heads.
Oh.
We can't use them. He goes, Charlie, don't worry about it. Next day he goes into his backyard, takes these off of a running 318 and says, Charlie, come pick them up. So thank you, Tim. I appreciate you helping us out.
Yeah, that's one thing that I have found since I've been doing YouTube is the community, the people that you meet along the way. It's not about the It's not about the destination. It's about the journey and the people that come into your life.
I apologize to the guys that I can't even keep track of how many names. I bet there's 10 guys that donated stuff, took stuff out of their pile, packed it, shipped it on their dime to make this happen.
Yeah.
We have guys that sent manifolds, spacers, crazy spacers. You got to see the one twisted spacer I have. I didn't even get to look at it yet. Everything has been donated. Valves have been donated just to help me along get this project done. I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
It does mean a lot, and it's going for a good cause. So I'm excited for this clean slate of what we're doing. I'm excited about the project once again, because there for a while I wasn't, because anytime something is sitting on my plate just simmering, man, it's like I don't want to touch it, don't even want to look at it. But now there's renewed excitement, rejuvenation into the project, and I'm excited to see how much power we can get from a lowly 318. Everybody says 318s are junk. No, I don't agree. I don't agree. They're just an engine like every other engine, and if you put the right principles and apply the mechanics to it, it will do.
It'll make power.
It'll make power.
It'll make power.
Like I said one time in one of my videos, if this was a 302 Ford, no one would be questioning it.
That's the truth. Now, some of the constraints were we had to use the stock size valves, guys. 1.78, 1.5s. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. Would have made it a lot easier with bigger valves.
Yeah.
So the airflow on the intake is about 230, give or take a few. And the flow on the exhaust is about 180, give or take. So you guys will be able to calculate that up. Unfortunately, our first couple of dyno runs are going to be strangled with the 2-barrel.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about that carb at all?
Yeah, why don't we go into talking about the first version of this engine,
I think that's a good idea.
And then what's going to transpire on the dyno in real time.
So what I did is I actually went back to like Tony's video where he has the engine right in front of him, and somehow or other I missed the point that the engine that he had right in front of him had a single plane intake on it.
Right. The early version.
The very first version, he wanted to run it with the BBD and the single plane, these cylinder heads. Sorry, stalled.
That's all right. It happens.
And he also added a couple things in there like offset grinding the crank, which is feasible, but it's not a backyard thing because it's expensive.
It is.
It's expensive to offset grind a crank, okay?
And so your average scope is not.
I didn't think that really fit the entire idea of being a low buck. Now, it's low buck. I put a ton of hours in this. Nobody else is going to put that much time in it.
No.
It was an experiment. It was something I wanted to see if I could do, and I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and this is the key. Since this engine is strangled with the 2-barrel configuration, the limiting factor is going to be the BBD. The BBD that I have, just Mopar Joe actually sent me, and we did a lot of flow work on it and got it to do some pretty cool things, but I still don't think that's going to be enough. Now, one of the key points that you made is using that single plane. That gives us a little bit of breathing room that we wouldn't necessarily have with the dual plane.
That original truck dual plane is horrible.
When you run a carburetor on a single plane, you're sharing that plenum with 8 cylinders instead of it being cut in half with 4. Now, I know you cut the divider down and all of that, but still, it's a limiting factor. What I'm wanting to do is I've actually purchased 2 Amazon BBD knockoffs, and they're actually pretty good. I've got one, the other one is coming.
They're still rated at 285 CFM?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same size butterflies,
Okay.
so on and so forth. The key to this is, since the first version of this engine is going to be run like a 1971 2-barrel engine, it's going to have a flat tappet cam in it. I wanted to have a known carburetor that we could break that camshaft in and not have some kind of crazy concoction of a carburetor where we kill the camshaft and kill the motor.
You make a really good point, because breaking in cam, flat tap it, if you don't do it right, guess what?
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen.
So once the camshaft is broken in, then that's when we can swap the carburetor, put on my Frankenstein carburetor, because I am going to make a monoblade for it and get rid of the two blades. I don't know what that's going to do to CFM. The thing that I don't know what it's going to do is fuel distribution, how it's going to meter the fuel. There's a lot of unknowns in doing that.
On the same thought, I knew Andy was going to do some crazy things with the carburetor, so I spent a ton of time
Yes, you did.
working on trying to get the nicest pattern of fuel in the chamber that I could and down the bore, because I think that's going to be key to making a more efficient engine.
Well, luckily, I believe this is my theory. Now, whether it's flawed or not, I don't know. But I do think that there's going to be so much manifold vacuum at wide open throttle that is actually going to help our atomization.
Makes perfect sense.
So the airspeed is going to be so great that it's not really going to have a choice but to break up. That's what I'm hoping for. And when you see the work that he's done on not only the cylinder heads but the intake manifolds, I mean, it's beautiful. It is totally beautiful work. And I think we're going to make the target. Now, will we? You know what I would be happy doing? If we could just beat the stock 340 rating, that's a huge accomplishment.
290, right?
And no, it was 275.
275. I thought it was 290. Okay.
No, 290 is the 6-pack version.
Oh, okay.
6-barrel version.
Six barrel. Yeah. Oh,
So-
that makes sense.
So with that being said, I think that's pretty realistic goals. And anything we get past that is icing on the cake.
Gravy. Oh, by the way, these flow better than the heads they used on the 340.
Pause that right now. Did you just hear what the man said?
With a smaller valve.
A J head or X head with a 202,
Yep.
these flow more than those stock.
Because Rob was nice enough to bring over some of that stuff. That I have videos on flowing those heads. These blow them out of the water.
So-
and it's a smaller port. So what happens when you have more flow with a smaller port, guys?
There you go. Then, let's see, what other point I was wanting to make? Oh, yeah. When you have a restricted engine, carburation-wise, in the intake track, it is so important to squeeze what you have
Yeah.
to the maximum that you possibly can get.
Good point.
So now this is where it's going to get kind of crazy. I don't know what kind of fuel this thing is going to want to run on. I don't care what kind of fuel it's going to run on. We're concerned with power numbers. But my job is to get as much squeeze as I can get in this thing That way we're going to deliver foot-pounds. What's your thoughts on
I
that?
thought your idea of using a longer rod was genius, because we are about 100 in the hole as far as that chamber, and if you put a little bit longer rod in, right, and your piston comes a little above the deck, that's all gravy for us.
Yes, that makes our job a whole lot easier.
These chambers turned out big. They're like 69.5 cc's.
Which
And
is huge for a 318.
if you want to grab that little piece, you'll see I kept more in the chamber than David's original design.
You probably can't see it that
I
well.
don't know if you guys can see it that well, but David took a lot of metal out of here, and I left a lot of it in. Now, I tried to emulate what he was thinking of, the way he wanted to flush out the air and fuel around the plug, and I did it with removing the least amount of metal I could.
And that sometimes that's what you have to do. You have to work with what you have.
Mm-hmm. And I knew compression would be a problem, so.
So now that we've talked about that stage one, let's talk about
Yes.
wide open, full
Yes.
throttle.
Yes. We don't have, as far as I'm concerned, I would love to see this tested with a Performer RPM air gap,
Mm-hmm.
a Victor Jr., a tunnel ram. The two other, these guys need 750 carb. The tunnel ram, probably two 600s.
Mm-hmm.
Two 600 on 318. I think that'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to turn up the wick.
And it's going to have a real camshaft in it.
Are you going to run a completely stock cam on the original first run?
Well, one of our viewers, Rodney Bird, sent me a General Kinetics cam that was like a 318 cheater cam. It's 390 lift, 240 advertised, 250 advertised, and it's on a 107. And
It'll make some power.
It's new old stock, you know. I think that's the. I mean, where can we find an original 318 cam?
You go right to the parts store and you buy a replacement.
Yeah. You might get lucky.
You
Maybe.
could do
I don't
that.
know. I don't mess with that stuff.
I didn't know that was a cheater cam, so that's like a super stock type style
Well,
cam.
I really don't know. I mean,
Because it's got to have the factory lift, but they can do more duration.
yeah, but it's only still 240 advertised duration.
240 advertised or 240?
240 advertised.
Oh, it's tiny.
It is tiny,
It's tiny.
which is still huge to.
It may be stock. That may be. I don't know what the stock 318 cam specs out at.
Yeah,
I know it didn't lift more than like 400,000.
Yeah. So now another key point that I want to make is in this engine build, I'm having to make the motor build. How far are we? How long?
18 minutes.
Okay. So another point I want to make about this engine build, we're having to make this thing kind of modular because we're actually going to have multiple versions of the same engine on the dyno running. We're starting out with the choke configuration. Well, there's a huge difference between the valve train requirements of that 390 lift hydraulic cam versus the camshaft that we're going to put into it. So unfortunately, there's no way around it. I'm going to have to be changing valve springs while this thing is actually on the dyno, because you can't put a solid roller spring on a hydraulic cam. So there's going to be some things I would like to try to keep the idea with a beehive valve spring. What's your thoughts?
Oh, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Because you can probably, with a beehive and maybe a titanium retainer,
Yeah.
I think that would be, you'd be able to use that stock flat tappet or whatever that cam is, and it would be fine.
Yeah. And, you know, it would definitely require some different rockers compared to the hydraulic rockers when we go. We'll have to have adjustable rockers when we put the man cam in it.
Put the man cam in.
That's what I'm going
Is it going to be? Is it going to be a solid lifter?
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, if we're going to turn this thing some RPM, which there's a lot of people out there doubting that we're going to turn this thing. When you hear this thing scream on the dyno, you will tell them about man, I got so excited when he brought this nugget in and I seen it. I recognized what it was. Tell him what it was in the floor.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
Now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I have to thank Addison. Addison, you guys know who Addison is. I did the EQ Magnum heads for him. And he watches. He subscribes, so he's like, when I said on the live, Andy, we need a crank. We should ask for a crank. Well, Addison says, Charlie, I got a forged 318 crank in my shed. I can dig it out for you. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm like, pull it out, ring it, make sure it sounds good. I'll come pick it up. It just happens to be a 318 3 crank. If you don't know what that is, Andy knows what it is.
Oh, all the Mopar guys go crazy over it. So
It's a nice heavy duty forging. But the way I heard about it, because I talked to Rob, because he knows Mopars better than me, it's a forged, hardened, not drilled pins. So it has more metal where the pins are. Now, David said sometimes the cranks are actually strengthened when they're drilled. Obviously, that crank came in like dump trucks. Industrial applications.
Yeah.
They knew were going to be used. So I think that crank will have no issues at 8,000.
I'm looking forward to it.
I think it's going to be a nice piece.
So, anything else you want to talk about?
I'm good.
Are you sure? You don't want to show off your intake or nothing like that?
Oh, we're gonna add that to this?
Well, I mean, this is your video. I'm just
Oh,
asking you.
dude, no problem.
I mean, this
Pause.
is your time to shine.
Pause that. Let's make some room.
He's gonna have you busy editing. I can promise you. I can see all that coming.
It's okay.
What program do you use?
You're gonna laugh. I just use the iMovie on my phone.
Hey, if it works.
It works perfectly.
Yeah.
It's like a game. It makes it so easy. Because that's why I can make a video every day.
Yeah.
Because if I had to do a lot of work, I wouldn't be able to do it.
That's the light one. It's a
That's the
backbreaker.
light.
It's a backbreaker.
Clunk. You know, if he makes me edit it, you know how I'm gonna cut it.
Oh yeah.
Because I never stop filming, so it'll be like,
Cut.
thump, and then he's there. Clunk.
So what are we looking at here, Charlie?
This is the original single
that's
plane, single plane 318. Actually, I think it's a 273 manifold, but they also used it on 318s.
It's casting number. Last three is 031. So this is unique. I'm sitting here looking at it.
That plenum's had a lot of work.
Yeah, but I also noticed that the separation wall is right here in the runners, which gives more plenum volume.
Yep.
So that's
It's
pretty
an
neat.
It's an interesting design.
It really is.
But in the center, they're much longer. Remember, this originally had two circular holes. The reason it's rectangular now is for
a monoblade.
I wasn't thinking a model blade, but I was trying to get as much air through this tiny little hole as I possibly could.
Well, actually, watching your video when you cut that, I was like, "Oh, that's convenient." Monoblade.
That works out nice, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this thing, I would go out on a limb to say that this is our best chance of making our power goals, because those other two manifolds, they are horrible looking. I spent 10 minutes out there looking at them a while ago.
The throttle body injection is way better. It's much bigger internally and has better shapes than that truck manifold. The truck manifold is terrible.
So, one point I want to make about power ratings from back in the day. And I find it interesting that a 318 strangled with this configuration of parts was rated at 230, and then your 340 was 275.
I don't see it.
So
I don't see it.
they need to understand in the early 1970s, you had what was called gross horsepower ratings.
That's right. They're different.
And then in 72, if you was to go look at the power ratings of this 230 horse 318, you would be looking at about 150, 160 horsepower. And so really we're starting off down here compared to here. What do you think?
That's why he called it Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Because he didn't think it could be done.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. I don't have a problem with that. And I like the original idea of fixing up stock stuff. That's where I came from, because I didn't have any money, but I wanted to go fast.
Right.
So I understand exactly the original plan. Yeah, we ran off the rails a little bit. I didn't help.
Well, there for a while we were talking about LS valves and all kinds of crazy
David went
things.
right into that.
Yeah.
His first question was, we can get a 4-barrel, right?
Yeah.
I went back and watched those videos.
Yeah.
And then later, the same thing. He's like, let's put LS valves in it. Put thinner stems in, be able to spin it to the moon. I know where he's coming from.
I do too. And
I know
we
exactly where
understand
he's
his
coming
thought
from.
process.
Oh, absolutely.
But I also think, well, a 178 3/8 stem valve, I'd be curious to weigh a 194 11/32 valve.
The 318 valves weigh a lot because that's where the weight is. It's in
Yeah.
that stem.
Yeah, but I would still be curious to see the difference. But there's not going to be any issue us turning this thing RPM wise with those valves.
I don't think so. If you
Yeah.
can get a nice beehive in there, the problem is the compression, the height.
The installed height.
The install height may be tough.
Well, that is a small block Mopar issue forever. I mean, that is one of the crutches. And then the crazy lifter angle in the block.
Yeah.
But it's nothing that can't be overcome. Racers have been doing it for years.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. I
No,
appreciate your
thank
help.
you. It's going to be good.